Welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. I'm your host Louis Sung, and today we're going to be discussing who are some of the surprise cuts that could happen in training camp. We have a lot of talent right now on this Miami Dolphins team, but there are going to be some players who don't end up making the cut. And I feel like more this year than any other year, the Miami Dolphins are going to have to make some really difficult decisions when they finally decide who's going to make the final cut and who is not. So let's go ahead and we'll get into it. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention that this show is brought to you as always by our good friends over at You Brake Wheel Fix. You Brake Wheel Fix is the complete automotive wheel solution. Ever parked too close to the sidewalk curb? You Brake Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, and curb rash. Or maybe your wheels are faded or peeling. You don't need to replace them, as You Brake Wheel Fix can refinish them to like new. Offering complete refinish options through powder coating, machining, and polishing, You Brake Wheel Fix is the answer to all of your wheel needs. And if you're just looking to give your ride a new look, You Brake Wheel Fix also offers many car customizing options such as new custom wheels and tires from your favorite brands, performance upgrades, window tinting, and suspension modifications. Located just south of Aventura, you can reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 or online at youbrakewheelfix.com. They are really active on all social media platforms at You Brake Wheel Fix, so shoot them a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and get an estimate in just minutes. So don't delay, go to You Brake Wheel Fix and start customizing your ride to show off your Dolphins fandom today. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is a revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, which are today, by the way. Keep an eye out for those. Flex Friday specials, where you can get your money back if you lose or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up. So use the promo code 5, that's F-I-V-E, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, that's promo code 5, spell that out, F-I-V-E. Go to PrizePicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with and get started winning today. Alright folks, so let's go ahead and talk about some of these players that I personally feel could see their last days as a Miami Dolphin fairly soon. So there's a lot of interesting names on this list, and I'm just going to go through them one by one. First and foremost, I think one guy who we're actually going to be surprised that is going to be leaving, but even though we honestly shouldn't be all that surprised, I think that Keon Crossing is going to end up not sticking around when this is all said and done. Personally, just looking at the way that he played last season, he was probably one of the most picked on cornerbacks that we saw during the whole season. It was actually rather painful to watch him get burned over and over and over again. He's a 6-year veteran out of Western Carolina. He's got great special team skills, and he is, quite frankly, he could fill the need of a special teams ace. But if that's what we're looking for, there are plenty of other players who can also do that. Someone like an Elijah Campbell, for instance, can take over that spot. There are other players like a Nick Needham, who's been a great special teams player for a while now. They have other options, and guys like Justin Bethel, perfect example. Justin Bethel, he is basically an all special teams player. Like if there was a Pro Bowl or an all pro listing for special teams, Justin Bethel would probably be on that list a lot. 12-year veteran, yeah, he's 33 years old, but there's a reason the Dolphins brought him back this season. I personally feel like just his veteran leadership, his know-how, and if you really watched him, just forget, never mind numbers and stats and all that wonderful stuff, because they have their place. But if you're just going off of the eye test, if you're going to compare Justin Bethel and Keon Crossing, you have to look at it from the whole perspective. Keon Crossing was thrown into the starting role. He got burned over and over again. Meanwhile, Justin Bethel had not significantly played any kind of actual cornerback snaps for many, many, many years. And he gets thrust into there because there's literally no other choice. And all things considered, he showed up and played really darn well for somebody who had never played cornerback, or at least hasn't played cornerback in a very, very long time. It's been several seasons since he's played actual defense. And he came in and he did the job well, because that's what a veteran does. He makes up for the fact that maybe he doesn't have the athleticism, maybe he doesn't have that same level of speed or strength. He just makes up for it with sheer willpower and wits. And you know what? That's something that Justin Bethel, he's going to be the one who ends up sticking around as a special teams eighth. I just don't see Keon Crossing being the guy who ends up sticking around. I think he's going to be one of the players who ends up cut when all is said and done. Speaking of players who I feel like is going to end up being cut, one of the guys that we're going to have to take a look at here is, quite frankly, and as sad as this is, Channing Tindall. The thing with Channing Tindall is that when you look at the linebacker core right now, you would think that we would try to keep as much depth as we possibly can, because right now, as far as players who can go sideline to sideline, there isn't a whole lot of depth at that position. You have David Long Jr., who apparently is currently dealing with some kind of a hamstring injury. That's what we are looking at. That's what we are having rumors about. But that's the reason the Dolphins signed him, is because he was going to be a fantastic player. Yes, he's been injury prone. A lot of Titans players have been looking at us like, oh yeah, that's the reason we let him go in the first place, you guys. It's because he can never be on the field. And already he seems to be a little banged up. But we're going to keep our fingers crossed. Mike McDaniel seems to think that it's not something worth being concerned about, so we will hold our breath on that, at least for the moment. Of course, he also did say the same thing about Byron Jones to start things off, and it turned out that was not so much the case. So we'll just have to have a little bit of faith that David Long Jr. will be available. Then, of course, Jerome Baker. He's been the consensus guy. He's been the best linebacker on the team, at least as far as being the middle is concerned, for quite some time. And then the guy that they did bring back, Duke Riley. And this guy, as a backup, he's a fantastic player. LSU, 7-year veteran. He's 28 years old. And whenever the Dolphins have needed somebody to come in and play backup linebacker, Duke Riley's been right there, ready to do this. Now, here's what makes Channing Tindall expendable. And ultimately, I feel like he will not make the team. Here are the reasons why. Because even though the Dolphins on paper don't seem to have a whole lot of depth in the middle, remember that Andrew Van Ginkel seems to be getting a lot of looks in the middle to become a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. Vic Fangio seems intent on turning him into that kind of a player. And based on what we've seen from minicamp and what reports have been coming out, the fact that Andrew Van Ginkel was seen wearing the orange jersey in spite of the fact that he had never really played this position ever since his early college days, there seems to be a lot of success going on here. It looks like his transition is going well. With that in mind, what does Channing Tindall offer at this point that somebody like a Jerome Baker does not, or a David Long Jr., or even a Duke Riley? Yeah, Channing Tindall has speed. That's fantastic. But he didn't do particularly well when thrown into the fire last season. And I get it. He was a rookie. He was still learning the whole process. But just the fact that you have Andrew Van Ginkel being transitioned, the fact that Vic Fangio went out of his way to tell Andrew Van Ginkel, listen, I have big plans for you and I want you to stay. Right now, if you take a look at this team, you have 4 guys who can conceivably play the middle spot. It's going to be David Long Jr., Jerome Baker, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Duke Riley. So, but the way this defense is looking like it's going to be functioning, you're not going to need a whole lot of linebackers on the field at any given moment. It looks like that most of it is going to be based on the secondary. And you have Xavier Howard, Kader Kohu, Nick Needham, Jalen Ramsey, Cam Smith. Trill Williams is probably going to be available as a safety if all reports and rumors are true. So with all that in mind, and did I forget to mention Javon Holland and Brandon Jones? Yeah. So all those players are going to be fighting for playing time, and all of them are probably going to be hitting the field very, very often. So why do you need a 5th guy to play in the middle? One who, if all you need is a quarterback spy, Jerome Baker can do that. If all you need is somebody who can rush the passer, Jerome Baker can do that. If you need somebody who can go sideline to sideline, David Long Jr. can do that. And if you absolutely need somebody to play backup, Duke Riley can do that. There's nothing that Channing Tindall offers other than the fact that he's a really fast linebacker that other players cannot do for him. I think that during training camp, the Dolphins are going to decide, you know what, we will hang on to you for a couple more years. Just as a practice squad player, we'll waive you. I will see if somebody claims you. I'm going to bet that nobody will because of just how raw he actually is. And he'll make it to the practice squad. He'll practice with the team. He'll work with Vic Fangio some more. But as far as actually making the 53-man roster, I'm starting to believe that Channing Tindall isn't going to make it because now that Andrew Van Ginkel is working in the middle, you don't need Channing Tindall anymore. So that's going to be my second player, Channing Tindall, that I don't think will make the roster. He will be a training camp cut. The next guy that I think is probably going to be somebody who gets the training camp cut, unfortunately, because I had a lot of high hopes for him at the moment, is Elijah Higgins, the guy that just drafted out of Stanford. So here's the thing with Elijah Higgins, right? I feel like that there is something there. I feel like he could be a potential good weapon as a tight end. I feel like he could potentially fill the kind of a role that Mike Gesicki left behind, but maybe he won't be quite as, how should I put this? I kind of don't want to be very insulting to Mike Gesicki because while he was here, he did some good things for us, but he was very limited in what he could do, sadly. He was a pass catcher. He was not a blocker. He was only good at one thing, and that one thing, while he was good at it, it did limit to what the Dolphins could do on offense. So here's Elijah Higgins now. They drafted him in the 6th round. He's 6'3". He's got some excellent ideas. He can become a tight end, and honestly, his measurables are just slightly underneath Sam Laporta, who I was actually advocating the Dolphins go ahead and draft with their first pick in the draft. So that didn't happen. They went with Elijah Higgins in the 6th round. They're trying to convert him from a wide receiver to a tight end to try to use some physicality, try to use his body in ways that would make him fit what the NFL is going to require of him, and that's all fine and good. But here's the problem, and this is why I think he ultimately doesn't make the cut, and he's going to have to vie for a spot on the Miami Dolphins practice squad. And quite frankly, I believe that just having experience in the offense, having some inside knowledge into how it all works, I believe, me personally, that Tanner Conner is actually going to have the inside scoop on how that's all going to go down. And granted, there are some players on this roster right now that may even push Tanner Conner out. Because right now, as it stands, you have Durham Smythe, who they just gave an extension to. So you know he's going to be sticking around. He's basically the balanced guy that I think they like Durham Smythe a lot more than they should, to be honest. I don't see him as much of a weapon. He's very much a blocker, which I get it. This offense requires something like that. And then there's Eric Saubert, who you could argue is an underrated weapon, but again, blocking is the thing that most people are looking at him for. And then there's Tyler Kroft, who we signed out of the Buffalo Bills, Julian Hill, and of course Elijah Higgins. And then Tanner Conner is there as well. I personally feel like Durham Smythe and Eric Saubert, those two are locks. And then it's going to be between Tyler Kroft and Tanner Conner. Now, the thing with Tyler Kroft is that they did go ahead and they signed him. They brought him in. They gave him a deal. And now the problem is that he's a veteran. The veteran players, I can see that Mike McDaniel does have a value for them. And Tyler Kroft does have something to offer, again, as a blocker. So what fits the offense more? Can Tanner Conner learn how to block enough to knock out one of these veteran guys, either Eric Saubert or Tyler Kroft? I don't know if that's the case. As of right now, Tyler Kroft is currently making about $25,000 total guaranteed. So basically his entire guaranteed contract is right there, $25,000, which he got when he signed the contract. So they could easily move on from him if they'd so decided. So it wouldn't be all that painful to just say thank you, but no thank you. We're going to go ahead and we are going to go with Tanner Conner. Now, Elijah Higgins does have a chance. Because Tanner Conner, again, he's just like Elijah Higgins. He's a wide receiver that's trying to convert to a tight end. He bulked up this year. He thinks that he'll be able to go ahead and fill that void. He'll be able to go ahead and step in and make the role that was envisioned of him. But Elijah Higgins is going to have to compete for it if he doesn't want to get the boot. So I don't think he's going to make it. I think the fact that Tanner Conner already knows the offense, that's going to give him the inside scoop. So Elijah Higgins is going to have to catch up fast if he wants to go ahead and make this roster. Now, this next one I feel like should not be a shock to anybody, but ironically enough, the Miami Dolphins just recently wished a happy birthday to punter Jake Bailey on their Twitter account. And the only thing that I thought to myself was, yeah, I mean, happy birthday to the guy who's going to get upended by Michael Turk, who is, again, the nephew of former Dolphins punter Matt Turk. Not to disrespect Jake Bailey or anything. It's not that I'm looking at this guy and saying, oh, you're a complete scrub in comparison to this rookie who they just picked up as an undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma. But there's just something about this situation that tells me that Michael Turk is going to get the job and Jake Bailey is not. Jake Bailey is coming back from an injury. The whole reason that Michael Turk is even here is to compete with him. And I think at the end of the day, very simply, I think Michael Turk is going to win the job. He does have a special teams pedigree, while Jake Bailey is a former Pro Bowler. The thing about him being a former Pro Bowler is just that. He's a former Pro Bowler coming off of injury, and now he's coming to the Miami Dolphins to try and resurrect his career, as opposed to Michael Turk, who you signed as an undrafted free agent. And I'm just going to go ahead and do some quick number crunching here. Jake Bailey is making, according to SpotTrack, $1,232,500 this year to stay with the Miami Dolphins, whereas Michael Turk would not even be making $1 million. So you look at that and you think, oh, well, this would be easy, right? Obviously, the guy who's cheaper is Michael Turk, and he might not end up being better. So now here is why I personally feel like signing Jake Bailey might have been a mistake. Because now what the Dolphins did is that they guaranteed over $1 million to Jake Bailey. So most of his contract is guaranteed. So it's going to be a little bit of a costly mistake for the Dolphins to say that they went ahead and they signed Jake Bailey. So unless the Dolphins just don't mind, and I personally feel like they shouldn't mind, and I think that ultimately what's going to happen is that Turk's going to beat out Bailey, but the Dolphins made a mistake. I really believe that. I think they made a mistake giving Jake Bailey all that money, and I think that Michael Turk, at the end of the day, is going to prove to be the better punter. Now, does this mean that the Dolphins are guaranteed to keep Michael Turk? No, I personally feel like Turk deserves the spot better, and I think that he will beat out Jake Bailey. And if Mike McDaniel is correct, and he says that the best 53 players will play, then Michael Turk will ultimately beat out Jake Bailey for one reason or another, and the Dolphins is going to have to eat that contract. And if that's the case, so be it. You made a mistake, move on from it, keep the guy that I think is ultimately going to be the better one, Michael Turk. And that's just all it is on that. And finally, just my last little surprise here. I feel like the Miami Dolphins are going to end up cutting River Craycraft at the end of training camp. Why do I say River Craycraft? Because you just look at this Miami Dolphins roster, man. This roster is loaded with wide receivers, really good wide receivers. So where is there room for somebody like a River Craycraft? Because you have Braxton Berrios, who can easily play special teams. Robbie Chosen, which is now what he is officially listed at the Miami Dolphins roster. You have Eric Ezunkama. You have Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle, and you have Cedric Wilson Jr. So at least with those right there, you have Wilson 1, Waddle 2, Hill 3, Ezunkama 4, you have Robbie Chosen 5, Braxton Berrios 6. So what exactly are you going to be doing with Craycraft? Is he going to be number 7? I don't think they're going to keep 7 wide receivers. I really do not. I think they're going to be looking at Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, and either Cedric Wilson or Robbie Chosen or Braxton Berrios to be the last of the weapons on that spot. So River Craycraft doesn't have the space. Where does Eric Ezunkama come in? He's wide receiver 6. I think that at this point in his career, I think that now that he's had the whole year to be basically redshirted, that he's learning the offense, he's working with Wes Welker, he's getting some one-on-one time with Mike McDaniel, they're going to look at him and say, now is your time to shine, because you showed up in preseason, you showed up in training camp, he was a really good player, he showed up, he turned eyes, he made it look like that he was going to be something special early on, and he was basically the team MVP of the preseason, if you want to go ahead and call that a thing. So that was why everybody was clamoring, why isn't Eric Ezunkama playing? Why isn't Eric Ezunkama playing? And Wes Welker would only just keep saying he's not ready yet. And everybody was scratching their heads, wondering what was it about Eric Ezunkama that he just wasn't ready yet? Why were they giving guys like Braylon Sanders the role instead of Eric Ezunkama? Why were they giving all these other players chances to play instead of this kid that they drafted who was supposedly some kind of physical phenom out of training camp in the preseason? Supposedly, he just wasn't ready for what this offense was demanding of him. I think this year, they're going to give him the opportunity to prove it on the football field, but that leaves River Craycraft the odd man out. I think they'll try to stash him on the practice squad, but as far as making the 53-man roster, I think Craycraft is a dead man walking. So that's going to be it for this show. Those are my guys that I think are going to be surprise cuts. River Craycraft, I don't personally feel like is much of a surprise per se, but he did have an extended role last season, so that's why I say that he should have a really good chance at least of competing, but I think he ultimately doesn't make it. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you go check out You Break Wheel Fix. Just go reach out at 305-748-0112 to Mark and his staff if you want to get your wheels fixed or if you want to give your ride an upgrade, and then use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, to go to PricePicks.com and go ahead and deposit your $100. They'll give you $100 for you to play with so you can get started winning today. That's going to be it. Thank you for listening. We'll see you all tomorrow for more Fins Nation.